She's here to make sandwiches. Laughter rippled through the operations room like the scratch of static, thin, dismissive. Lieutenant Hales didn't bother looking up from his console. The others didn't stop their chatter. A few even turned in their chairs to get a better look. She entered quietly, balancing a tray of food on one arm. Tea, cold wraps, and those little lemon bars everyone joked about like they weren't devoured by nightfall. Petite, maybe 5'4". Light brown hair, tied back in a no-nonsense bun. She moved carefully between the consoles, silent as shadow. Someone whistled under his breath. Then the wall lit up. Sector Delta. Real-time drone footage. On screen, smoke, movement. Blurred silhouettes scattering across broken terrain. Voices cracked through the speakers, urgent, overlapping. Negative on evac, taking fire from North Ridge, Foxtrot pinned, no cover, 3 down, Jesus. She froze. The tray tilted slightly in her hands. One of the teacups rattled. Her jaw clenched. "That's my unit," she said. No one laughed. Not now. The room fell silent except for the dry buzz of the projector and the distant panic of voices trapped in the valley. One of the analysts looked over his shoulder at her. Lieutenant Hales turned, finally, brows raised, incredulous. "Your unit?" Her eyes were locked on the screen. Then she set the tray down, gently, deliberately, and walked forward. Thus began the unraveling. The revelation. The slow, stunned recognition of a woman they dismissed as the kitchen help, now standing before them, not in rank or uniform, but in knowing. In presence. In memory. Her name was Emily Carter. Age 34. No insignia. Just a silver locket tucked beneath a faded crewneck shirt and the steady silence of someone who's walked through hell, and didn't come back for applause. She didn't ask permission. She simply stepped closer to the screen and whispered, "They're coming in too shallow. That ridge is unstable. Last shelling shifted the whole slope. If they push north, they'll slide straight into an open fire corridor." Someone muttered, "Who the hell is she?" Emily didn't turn. She pointed at a cluster of trees on the map. "You need to reroute them south-southeast. There's a drainage path, used once during hillside blackout. They'll need to crawl. 2 hours, maybe 3. But it's cover. And it's the only way they'll make it out." Lieutenant Hales blinked. Colonel Braddock leaned forward. "How do you know that?" Emily reached under her shirt, unclasped the locket, and opened it. Inside, a dog tag, scratched, scorched, barely legible. Carter, E. Tactical Rescue, Ghost Echo. Last survivor from Grid 7. She looked him in the eye. "And I remember every inch of that hill. Because I carried 6 men out while it burned behind me." The silence after her words was the kind that swallowed breath. Even the static on the comms felt quieter. Lieutenant Hales looked like he'd been slapped. Colonel Braddock's hand hovered over the keyboard, but he didn't type. She let the locket close with a soft metallic click. Then she reached across the table and pulled the map console toward her. The holographic terrain shifted under her fingers. "Forget the digital overlays," she said. "That terrain changed after the 3rd shelling run. The valley to the east, it's caved in. Satellite won't pick it up for another cycle. But I was there when it cracked." An intelligence officer muttered, "She was Kia. Ghost Echo was wiped at Grid 7. Braddock's voice came low, cold. "Run her name." Fingers tapped. A screen blinked. Emily Carter. Presumed killed in action, 3 years ago. Unit classified. No public debrief. No survivor confirmation. Yet here she stood. In boots worn slick by years, with eyes that had memorized death, not as a theory, but as an old companion. Someone asked, if Ghost Echo's gone, how the hell are you still standing? She didn't answer. Instead, she zoomed in on a ravine near the south corridor. There's a fault line here. It'll hold. Underneath, old storm tunnel. Cracked during the initial advance, but I used it to pull a medic and a comms operator out. They'll have to crawl, single file. But it's dry now. The rains haven't come yet. The officer beside her blinked. That's not in any of our data. I didn't draw it, Emily said. We didn't have time for reports. We were trying to survive. She marked the route manually. No satellite. No digital aid. Just memory and instinct. Foxtrot's lead is Sergeant Ellis, she said. If he's still alive, he'll take the route if you mark it as priority red. No questions. He'll remember my hand signals. And he'll trust them. Why? Hales asked. Why would he trust a cook? She looked up. Because the last time he heard my voice, I was dragging him out of a firestorm. And I told him I'd come back. The room was very still. Colonel Braddock's voice broke it. We'll prep a team. But this route. I lead it, she said. You won't have time to learn it. And the terrain's worse than it looks. I'll walk them through it. There was a long pause. You're not cleared for field, Hales muttered. I'm not cleared for anything, Emily replied. Not anymore. But I'm going. It wasn't a request. She stepped back, hands at her sides. Her breathing steady. Braddock studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, slow. You'll have a unit at 0400. No insignia. No comms chatter. If this goes wrong. It already went wrong, she said. 3 years ago. I'm just fixing what we left behind. She turned and walked out. The room exhaled, finally. Someone whispered, Ghost Echo wasn't a myth. Later, when they reviewed the drone feed again, they would find the slope shift just as she said. The unstable northern route collapsing under weight. The southern fault line, untouched. And every operator in that room would remember her words. She didn't sleep that night. In the silence before deployment, Emily Carter sat alone in the old supply room behind the mess hall, lacing her boots. The same boots she'd worn when Ghost Echo went dark. The same boots she'd walked out of the Inferno in. The leather was cracked, the stitching hand repaired. But they still held. She found her field jacket folded under a box of ration packets. No rank. No patch. Just olive drab, stained faintly with old ash. She clipped her name tag back on, Carter. It felt strange. Not because she didn't belong in the field, but because for 3 years she'd trained herself to disappear. In the kitchen. In the back hallways. In silence. A ghost by choice. To keep the truth small enough not to draw notice. She carried no weapon. Only a medical satchel, a flare, and the memory of a terrain most had only seen in cold infrared. On her wrist she wore a paracord bracelet, frayed at the edge, colors faded. It had belonged to one of the operators who never made it out. His name was never spoken. But she carried him anyway. At 0355, a blackout chopper lowered in without lights. 4 men waited beside it, silent, armored, faces half covered. One of them stepped forward when he saw her. Operator Carter? She nodded. No rank, he said, holding out a headset. You lead. We follow. She said nothing. At 0402, the bird lifted off. The cabin was silent but for the dull chop of rotors and the occasional static hum of long-range comms. No one spoke. Not even her. But as the dark valley of Sector Delta came into view, as its broken hillside stretched below them like old scars, she leaned toward the cockpit and said 3 words. Drop at Ridge 9. The pilot didn't argue. No one did. The insertion was fast. Low. Sharp. They hit ground at 0421. The air smelled like burnt copper and ash. Emily moved without hesitation, already charting their course by feel. The valley's shadows had shifted slightly since she'd last seen them, but the bones of the terrain were the same. Her fingers traced stone and soil like a surgeon remembering a scar. They found the first mark, an old carved X in the root of a tree. The others wouldn't have noticed. She crouched, adjusted her direction slightly, and signaled forward. The tunnel entrance came 38 minutes later. One of the operators muttered, "You couldn't even see this on thermal." She didn't answer. Just nodded and began crawling. At 0556, the call came in. "Command, this is Shadow Team. We have Foxtrot. 2 wounded. 1 walking. 1 carried. Moving south via Shadow Path." Colonel Braddock gripped the edge of the console. "Repeat. Who is carrying them?" The voice crackled again. "Unknown civilian operator. She says she's been here before." On screen, the drone camera zoomed in. Emily, silhouetted in fog, crawled up a slope with one man across her shoulders. Another limped behind, hand on her pack. No gunfire. No chatter. Just motion, steady and grim. She emerged through the smoke like something pulled from memory, not from flesh. The evac point came into view at 0607. When she saw the flare, green for safe, she raised one hand without looking back. Foxtrot's remaining operator collapsed into a crouch beside her. Sergeant Ellis, dirt-streaked, eyes wide, stared at her. "You," he rasped. She nodded. "You were in that firestorm. 3 years ago. Grid 7. "Yes," she said. "You pulled me out," he whispered. She didn't smile. Just adjusted the wounded man's weight across her back. "I said I'd come back." The evac bird landed 6 minutes later. They lifted the wounded inside. She didn't board. "You're not coming?" Ellis asked. She shook her head. "This ride's yours." He reached out suddenly, grabbed her wrist. "I remember your voice. You sang to me. That night. Over the comms." She nodded once. "It was the only way I knew you were alive," she said. "So I kept singing." Then she turned, boots crunching gravel, and walked back into the mist. Back at Forward Base Orion, Colonel Braddock stood outside the landing bay as the evac bird touched down. He counted the survivors. And saw that she wasn't among them. "She stayed?" he asked the operator. The man nodded. "She said she had more ground to walk." Braddock exhaled. "Goddamn Ghost Echo." And then he turned to the command tent, where her name, once marked Kia, waited to be rewritten. They didn't see her return. No announcement. No radio contact. No triumph. At 0800, Emily Carter re-entered Forward Base Orion through the rear checkpoint, mud-streaked, sleeves torn, her satchel half open and hanging by a single strap. She nodded at the gate guard, who blinked in confusion but raised the barrier anyway. She didn't head toward debrief or medical. She went to the kitchen. Inside, the morning meal rotation had already begun. 2 privates scrubbed pans. A corporal doled out powdered eggs and beans. When they saw her walk in, they fell silent. One of them nearly dropped a tray. She nodded once and crossed to the sink. Turned on the tap. Rinsed her hands, knuckles raw, dirt packed under her nails. Then she picked up a stack of teacups and began drying. By 0830, the kettle whistled. At 0905, she walked into the briefing room with a tray of tea, same as she had every day since her name was scrubbed from active roles. No one laughed this time. Colonel Braddock stood at the head of the table. His uniform pressed sharp, his expression unreadable. Around him, analysts, operatives, logistics officers sat in wary quiet. Emily set the tray down. Began pouring. Braddock spoke. Unit Foxtrot is alive today because someone remembered terrain we'd forgotten. Someone knew to ignore the digital overlays. Someone walked ground most of us only know from aerials and legend. He reached into a folder on the table. Laid something on the surface, a tattered patch, edges frayed, the faded emblem of Ghost Echo barely visible in the morning light. The person who planned today's extraction route saved 3 lives. Carried one of them with her own shoulders. Delivered them without a shot fired. He turned. Looked at Emily. Carter. She didn't flinch. I'd like to reclassify your record, he said. We'll clear the Kia status. Reinstate your honors. Emily shook her head. I didn't come back for status. Then why? Her voice was quiet, but steady. Because Ellis was still breathing. Because no one else would go. Braddock watched her a moment longer. Then he nodded. As you were. She turned and left. The room remained silent. The patch stayed on the table, untouched. Back in the kitchen, she finished her tea. Then went back to stacking trays. The day moved on around her. Helicopters landed, briefings resumed. A mission was logged as successful. No fatalities. Minor injuries. By noon, the footage from the drone was circulating. Officers paused as they watched her silhouette climb the ridge. Saw her lift a wounded man without flinching. Not one of them could say her name without a beat of hesitation. They called her the Ghost in Green. But no one dared call her a cook again. That evening, Emily sat alone behind the mess hall, watching the distant hills fade into shadow. The wind carried the faint buzz of radio static. She closed her eyes. Somewhere in that landscape, ghosts stirred. Names with no graves. Voices only she remembered. She unfastened her locket. Inside, the scratched dog tag still rested. But now, beside it, a folded slip of paper, an updated map of the southern corridor. Hand-drawn. Dated that morning. Annotated by a survivor. In the corner, for Carter. You said you'd come back. You did. She closed it, tucked it into her jacket. Then rose to go. Tomorrow would be another morning. Another tray of tea. And maybe, another name she could save from being forgotten. Word traveled. Not through press releases or official commendations, but in whispers passed between units, in the long silences before deployment, in the looks exchanged over mess hall tables when her name came up. Ghost Echo wasn't dead. She just worked the kitchen. The younger soldiers didn't know what to do with the story. Some pretended it wasn't true. Others couldn't stop watching her, how she moved, how she never spoke unless spoken to, how she carried the tea with that same steadiness she used to carry a bleeding man up a burning ridge. Colonel Braddock, for his part, said little. But the next week, a small box appeared on her bunk. Inside it, her original unit patch, restitched. A note in Braddock's hand, records lie. Memory doesn't. She didn't pin it on. Just closed the box and placed it in the bottom of her footlocker. Then came the ceremony. It wasn't planned. Not officially. The veterans of Unit Foxtrot, those who survived the Delta rescue, requested a private moment. They asked to meet her. Not in the command tent. Not in front of a camera. Just at the southern edge of Base Orion, under the old field tarp, near the rusted signpost that still read, Echo Transit Line, decommissioned. She arrived just after sunrise. They stood in a line, 8 men, 3 women, most of them bandaged or limping. Some still wore parts of their evac gear. All were silent. Sergeant Ellis stepped forward. He was thinner than she remembered. Older, too, though only 3 years had passed. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. "You dragged me out of fire. Twice now. First time, I thought you were a ghost." She said nothing. He reached into his chest pocket. Pulled out a flattened, singed metal bracelet. "This belonged to my spotter. Ghost Echo recovered it after the hillside collapse. We buried him without it. He would have wanted you to have it." She took it. He stepped back. Another operator came forward, a woman with a bandage across her scalp and the gaze of someone who had looked death in the eyes and blinked last. She didn't speak. Just extended her hand. Emily took it. One by one, they offered tokens, dog tags, insignias, a photo, a field compass. Small things. Forgotten things. Each had once belonged to someone Ghost Echo couldn't save. Each had been recovered, protected, remembered. None of them asked why she hadn't come forward sooner. None of them needed to. Later that week, a new recruit burst into the kitchen, shouting about an incoming drone breach on Grid 6. His voice cracked. Panic thick in his throat. He said command was scrambled, that no one had eyes on the corridor and the maps didn't make sense. Emily rinsed her hands. Then dried them slowly, picked up a pen, and asked for a topographical printout. In 5 minutes, she'd sketched 3 alternate entry points, marked a fallback ridge, and highlighted an ambush pass that hadn't been used in 5 years. The recruit blinked. "How do you know this?" She just handed him the page. "I was stationed there once. When the fires still burned." He ran. She went back to boiling water. Eventually, people stopped questioning her presence. They didn't salute. They didn't promote. They just moved around her with quiet recognition, like the way one would around a war memorial, still, solemn, knowing. She never raised her voice. Never gave orders. But when she stepped into a room during briefing, chairs shifted to give her a view. And when terrain questions arose, heads turned instinctively toward her. Someone updated the base legend wall, one of the junior techs. Under the list of fallen units, a new line was etched. Ghost Echo. Operational legacy sustained through Operator E. Carter. She walks the paths we buried. At night, Emily walked the perimeter once a week, alone. She didn't carry a weapon. Just a red field lamp and a crumpled piece of paper, a list of names. Those who never came back. She read one aloud with every lap. A private ritual. Unseen. Then, weeks later, something happened she didn't expect. Colonel Braddock handed her a sealed folder. No name. No markings. Inside, a mission brief, 3 trapped operators in a collapsed tunnel system 2 clicks west of Hillside Blackout. The topography was too unstable for standard evac. Drones couldn't map the interior. Braddock's voice was low. "They're writing it off. But I thought, if anyone could get in." She took the file. Didn't answer. At dawn, she packed her gear and vanished into the dust. 3 days passed. No signal. Then, on the 4th morning, as the sun broke the ridge, a field radio crackled to life. Her voice, steady. 3 recovered. 2 ambulatory. 1 carried. Exfil secured. Pause. Terrain's worse than before. But the ghosts still know the way. When she returned, she didn't go to debrief. She went to the kitchen. Washed her hands. Put the kettle on. And when the officers arrived to ask what she needed, what they could offer in return, she just said, "I'll need more cups. Looks like we'll have visitors." Time passed. The conflict in Sector Delta quieted, but the stories didn't. They grew. Slowly, steadily, like roots beneath ash. Her name became a kind of refrain. Not shouted. Not pinned on walls. Just murmured across radios, passed down through unit briefings and encoded into debrief notes. Consult Carter if terrain unknown. Trust Echo Path if visibility fails. Ask Kitchen if command is lost. She wasn't reassigned. She didn't take a rank. But now, when new operatives arrived at Forward Base Orion, they were told, unofficially, to learn the layout of the kitchen. Not for food. For history. The walls of the kitchen changed. No one knew who started it. One day, someone pinned a folded map to the side wall, terrain grid with hand-sketched notes. Carter's route, Delta Evac. A week later, someone else tacked up a patch, dirty, frayed, with the initials, RMK, the last operator Emily carried from Hillside Blackout. Then more followed. Photos. Slips of paper with names. Compass drawings. Handwritten thank you notes. A broken wristwatch. No ceremony. No sign. Just reverence. They called it the Wall of Echo. She never spoke about what happened the day Ghost Echo went dark. But once, late at night, a young operator cornered her behind the mess tent. He was barely 22. Scars still fresh. Eyes too wide. He whispered, "Is it true you pulled a team out after everyone else died?" She didn't blink. "I stayed behind," she said. So the last one wouldn't be alone. Then she walked away. He didn't follow. In early autumn, Colonel Braddock was transferred. Rumor said it was a promotion, internal command for a strategic theater up north. Before he left, he requested a private briefing. Emily entered without a word. He gestured toward a chair. She didn't sit. He slid a folder across the desk. "Command wants your full record reinstated. Honors. Deployment medals. Pensions. They'll backdate it." She didn't touch the folder. He added, "There's talk of giving Ghost Echo a memorial. Naming rights. Something formal. Your name would lead the role." Still, she didn't move. Finally, he sighed. "You've done more in silence than most do in parades." She met his eyes. "That's because I remember what war smells like. And I remember the people we lost when the cameras turned off." He nodded. She left the folder unopened. The base chaplain once told her, "You carry too many names." She didn't argue. But that night, she added another to her list, the chaplain's own brother, whom she had pulled from a collapsed trench in 23. She hadn't known the name then. Just the face. Memory has a way of finishing its own story. And then came the day when they tried to send her home. A directive from Central: all irregular personnel not assigned to current command rotations must report for reassessment or be decommissioned. They handed her a transport order. She looked at it, quiet. Then walked into the strategy room. Lieutenant Hales was there. The same man who once laughed when she walked in with sandwiches. He stood up when she entered. "Operator Carter," he said, almost awkwardly. She handed him the directive. "They're trying to erase what doesn't fit." He read it, face tightening. "I can talk to Braddock's replacement," he offered. "No," she said. "Let them send me." He frowned. "Why?" She studied the map on the wall. Sector Echo, still smoldering. "Because if I stay, they'll keep pretending the war is clean. If I leave, they'll have to explain what they've lost." He didn't understand. Not completely. But he nodded anyway. The next morning, at the base's outbound terminal, she arrived with a single duffel. Same one from 3 years ago. No insignia. No escort. But the platform wasn't empty. Every operator she'd pulled from Sector Delta stood in formation. silent. Not saluting. Just standing. Sergeant Ellis was in front. In his hands, a small box. Inside, the restitched Ghost Echo patch. This time with her name sewn beside it. "You said you didn't want honors," he said. "So we're giving you this instead." He held it out. She took it. Didn't speak. As she stepped onto the transport, one of the younger soldiers whispered, "What do we do now?" Sergeant Ellis answered, not looking away from the horizon. "We remember." 2 weeks later, a new operator arrived at Base Orion. First time in active deployment. Nervous. Eager. He asked where the command office was. The tech on duty pointed to the mess hall. "Talk to the woman near the T. She's not command. But she'll show you the path out." "But I thought she was just..." The tech cut him off. "No. She's not just anything. She's Echo." That night, back in a town far from war, a woman entered a quiet kitchen. She unpacked her things. Set her boots by the door. Hung the name tag, Carter, on a small nail above the stove. Then, from a worn envelope, she drew out a folded list. A list of names. She lit a candle. And began to read. One by one. Out loud. Alone. But never forgotten. The last time she returned to Forward Base Orion, she wore civilian clothes. The boots were the same. The silence, too. But this time, the base stopped when she walked through. Not because of orders. Because they remembered. She passed through the outer perimeter without question. No ID check. No delay. The new sergeant on duty straightened instinctively, though she bore no insignia. Inside, the mess hall was quiet. Noon rotation, half filled. When she entered, heads turned. Some stood. Others simply nodded. She poured tea for herself. Then sat down at the end of a long table. Not at the front. Not in the center. Just at the edge, where she could see the exit. Where she always sat. Lieutenant Hales entered halfway through her cup. He looked older now. His uniform more worn. He saw her, crossed the room, and paused. "Everyone thinks you came back for honors," he said. She didn't look up. "I came back," she said, "because no one else did." He nodded. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." She finished her tea. Most people don't. Then she stood, reached for her tray. Before she could take a step, Hales spoke again. "They're adding your name to the memorial wall. Ghost Echo. It's official now." She froze. Then turned. "I don't need your thanks." He blinked. "I know. I need you to remember next time," she said, "that the person you think is a cook might be the only one in the room who's already pulled someone out of hell." And with that, she left. Back to the kitchen. Back to the routine. But no one ever saw her the same way again. Because now they knew. Some heroes don't come back for honor. They come back because the map is still burned into their skin, and someone, somewhere, is still calling for help. And when no one else answers, they go. Again.